On July 4th, 2026, a group of 18-year-old boys took a boat to Horn Island to celebrate the 4th of July. All of the kids on that boat made it home safely, except for one. Nolan Wells never returned home that evening. Instead, his body was found on the shore right near where his boat had initially docked, 2 days later on the morning of Monday, July 6th. The Cajun Navy conducted a almost 2-day rescue search for Nolan, and they were quite confident that he had drowned and his body washed up on shore. However, it's now been 3 weeks since Nolan's body was found, and there are still more questions than answers. And with each new detail emerging from the case, the true reason for Nolan being left behind and losing his life that day becomes a lot more eerie and disturbing. We'll unpack it all, starting with, for example, a statement from Brian Thrasher from the Cajun Navy, who initially discovered Nolan's body. Look at what he had to say.
Coming back up north towards the northwest tip of Horn Island, when we noticed there were boats in the center of the island where there's a lagoon tip, and then when we got closer, we noticed there were 2 boats already parked in tandem on the beach. That was strange. It was a Monday morning. It was obvious they weren't fishing. So we descended and to about maybe 450 feet, 500 feet, and we could tell it was law enforcement boats, law enforcement personnel. And then I noticed that there was a what appeared to be a body right at the shoreline, laying face down. The one thing I'll say about the condition of the body, and again, I want to stress very, as much as I can, that I'm at 450 feet in the air. But normally when a body's been floating, you'll see some bloating and whatnot. He wasn't in the water that long. The water temperature was high. He has a low body mass index. Normally, we'll look for a body to pop up on about day 4, but we knew it was possible he could pop up as soon as day 2, and this was day 2. I'm trying to think of the most respectful way to say it. The body did not seem, at that height, to be disproportionate to the way it should look. Now, I could not get a good look at his face. So I was really looking at, his back of his legs, back of his arms. And so that was my vantage point, and I just want to stress to everybody that that's not an ideal vantage point. And plus, I'm flying at like 90 knots, so I'm going pretty fast.
Now, as mentioned by Thrasher, a drowning victim typically begins bloating after some time in the water, caused by bacteria inside the body producing gases. It is from the buildup of gases that causes the torso and other tissues to swell that often lead the body to rise to the surface. Now, here's where it gets interesting. According to research, bloating typically begins in warm water, 25 degrees Celsius or higher, around day 2 or day 3, and usually takes longer in cold water. Now, Wells' body was found on day 2 since he went missing, so that timeline aligns. But again, according to Thrasher's vantage point, the condition of his body did not align with what many may have expected, because upon research and looking up the water temperature on Horn Island that day Nolan went missing, as well as July 5th and 6th, the water was considered warm to hot, meaning that a drowning victim should definitely show signs of bloating in those conditions. In the comment section of his interview with TMZ, one user would go on to say, "Sounds like he was placed in the water that day," while another would write, "Definitely dumped overnight."
It's very interesting that the Cajun Navy and authorities are confident that Nolan Wells had simply drowned and washed up on shore 2 days later. However, normally when someone drowns, their body becomes bloated, full of water. And Brian says Nolan's didn't look to be in that condition. Nolan was also found in the exact same place that he was seen in his final moments alive. TMZ had also received a photo of what's believed to be Nolan Wells on a separate boat, not the same boat he came in from, at around 2:23 p.m. on July 4th, the last day anybody had heard from Nolan Wells. And I have to give a shout out to the YouTuber Chronicle Speaks, because she's done amazing investigative work and breakdowns on everything surrounding this case. And so here you'll see not just the picture of Nolan on that separate boat, but also tracking the number of that specific boat, who it belongs to, and a deeper lens into the dynamics of how passengers were getting to and from that island, who they were with, and overall the activity and movements of everybody involved.
Now, early this morning, TMZ posted a video, which I posted last week, of what appears to be Nolan on the back of a boat. So let's zoom in and slow it down. They're saying that this is Nolan on the back of a boat and it looks like he's getting a drink. There's an older gentleman and it looks like he's talking to an older lady. They're also on the boat. So if you go to boatsonly.com and type in Ike Pyron, then you'll find out the owner of the actual boat that Nolan came in on that we believed was Wyatt's boat, because if you recall, Warren's birth mother said that Warren did not have a boat. The boat that they came in on was Wyatt's boat. And if you look up the vessel number of the boat that they got on, according to the GPS coordinates, that vessel number is MI 4088BU. And if we go back to boatsonly.com and look up Ike Pyron's boat number, his boat number is showing MI 4088BU. Ike is also the one that made the statement, "I see you reposted this, so I just want to let you know what really happened. Can't be listening to all these black people saying his friends did something. He was with my brother that day on my boat and he chose to stay. They know who the girl is. It happens at Horn all of the time. These guys posting this shit on TikTok are all worthless blacks who want nothing but views. Nolan has basically lived at my house for the last 3 years. We would never do anything to harm him." So the boat Nolan originally came in on is at the top, and the boat that he was on later is at the bottom. These are not the same boats. Now, according to TMZ, they say that you can see a couple of older adults also on board the boat, which is anchored in neck-deep water, and there are several people hanging out nearby. Metadata shows that the video was recorded at 2:23 p.m. on July 4th, 2026. Now, while the video does not show the face of the guy on the back of the boat, the person who shot it felt strongly enough it could be Nolan that they went to the cops. Now, it was more than just these 4 guys. There were actually 3 boats that traveled together, so Nolan more than likely jumped from boat to boat. GPS coordinates were tracked for all 3 boats, but we only got information about one. So if this allegedly happened at 2:23 and the guys say that they did not see him after 3 o'clock, then they saw Nolan after this video. What happened between 2:23, 3 o'clock, and 4:30 when you guys allegedly had bilge pumping?
Now, the timeline of the movements of the boat that Nolan actually came into Horn Island on add even more suspicion to this case. The traveling back and forth has most definitely raised a lot of eyebrows.
The boat data came in from Nolan Wells. Okay, you did a whole lot of damn traveling for that boat to be damn messed up. Look, at 9:56 a.m., that boat leaves to go to Horn Island. Okay, green, it's fine, ain't nothing wrong with that. Look, the boat arrived at 11:14 at Horn Island. Fine, that adds up to me, right? Then you leave at 4:31 p.m. All right, so y'all had a good little time. But I don't know if Nolan Wells was on that boat or not. Something tells me that he was on that damn boat. This is where it gets real fuzzy. From 4:31 to 5:52, they done took a damn U-turn. They went somewhere and they went to Fort Bayou. Okay, well, I thought the damn boat was messed up. You were supposed to go from Horn Island back to the dock. Y'all took your asses to Fort Bayou. Why? What was there? The boat was messed up. Why would you go there? Look, then you leave Fort Bayou and you return to the original spot at 6:06 p.m. So from 4:31 to 6:06 p.m., there is fuzziness in here. That's about an hour and a half. If I'm not mistaken, about an hour and a half. Something happened to Nolan Wells in between this time right here. For them leaving that damn Horn Island to returning back to that, something happened at Fort Bayou. Yes, it did. And then, look, after 6:06 p.m., you carry your ass back to Fort Bayou. Probably to check the scene out, make sure everything's clear from what y'all, whatever y'all damn did. So then, after 7:19, look, the boat was transported by car to Biloxi, Mississippi. Now, y'all got some explaining to do. What happened between 4:31, basically between 6:00 and 6:06? But for real, what happened between 4:31 and 7:19? What the hell happened? Yeah, I know. And then the best friend told my son, well, he not even the best friend, because the mama cleared that up and said, you know what? That ain't his childhood friend. I don't know no Tracy. Why would his mama even name him some stupid shit like that? I don't know him. Some said we ain't want to see him die. You ain't want to see him die, then what the hell, what you do to see him die? We all didn't want to see him die. Yeah, you better stop talking, young man. You better stop talking, young man. And I think they paid you to talk. But now you sound like a fool. What happened?
So we know that there were 3 boats that went to Horn Island together. Nolan was on one of those boats. They were all apparently friends. We don't know exactly which boat Nolan had planned to take home because, according to Nolan's friends, the same friends who he had drove on the boat to the island with, they claim he decided to stay back on his own on the island because he was hanging out with a girl named Katie. But even though we don't know which boat Nolan had definitely planned on taking home, what's peculiar is reportedly the Cajun Navy was actually denied access to allow their search dogs to examine all 3 boats that came to the island with Nolan.
We offered our dogs to bring to the boat. There's only one thing that will clean blood off of a boat. I'm not going to mention it because it'll give people ideas. But I doubt if somebody would have done something, they would have used this chemical to remove the blood. So we've offered our services to bring the dogs around the boat of everyone that was potentially involved in this. So the federal land thing is a big deal. So the body being dumped, I would say that let us bring the dog to the boat. Let us bring it. They said the boat was clean that night or the day before. There's only one thing that's going to clean it. If there's blood in that boat, we'll find it. If you came with these guys and they didn't bring you home, that is not uncommon. So I think there's where the focus needs to be. A, on let's get this notion that there was a body dumped. Let's bring the dogs to that boat, and we'd be willing to offer our services to go check that out. And B, these guys in the boat that he came with, it's okay that they left him on the island or they didn't bring him in. But yeah, as far as the body being dumped, our services are offered, and they've been offered to go bring the dogs around that boat.
So not only are they not being transparent with allowing these search dogs from the Cajun Navy to go on these boats that had absolutely nothing to do with Nolan's death, but also the story about the boat allegedly getting ready to sink and having to be towed back.
We're sinking. Can you all please come?
Is also not making sense. No one has come forward to say that they saw the boat be towed 2.75 miles, and then the tow company is denying everything. Take a listen to this.
Someone on the boat reported a mechanical failure to a private towing company.
I want to get this boat on sank and towed back.
The towing dispatcher reached out to a local boat captain to help.
It sounds like a bunch of kids on board on Horn Island. He wants you guys to go out there and unpump the boat and then tow it in.
But the company says it did not end up towing the boat, saying to NBC News in a statement, before assistance was rendered, the vessel owner advised that sea tow was no longer needed because help had already been obtained. Sea tow's involvement concluded at that point.
Yet, according to the GPS coordinates, the boat could not make it off the island and had to be towed by sea tow, allegedly, off of the northwestern tip of the island 2.75 miles before normal operation resumed.
You don't find that suspicious? You don't find that suspicious?
Judge Ashley Cole, Warren's stepmother, said they left around 4:30 p.m. after the boat was taking on water and they had an issue with the bilge pump. However, Warren's birth mother said that Wyatt's boat started to fill with water. His boat ended up breaking down and was towed in. These stories are not matching up. No one is wanting their boat searched as if they have something to hide. The tow company is denying claims of towing you guys 2.75 miles as you said they did, and a body that has no bloat as it should have had it been in the water for 2 days mysteriously washes up exactly where these boys left.
You don't find that suspicious?
So keep that detail in mind, that the boat that Nolan came into Horn Island on ended up leaving the island and calling for help because there was some sort of hole in the boat that could have caused it to flood. Now, in the breakdown from Chronicle Speaks, you can hear her mention how Ashley Cole said that the boat that Nolan came into Horn Island on actually left Horn Island at 4:30 p.m. with all the same kids who had came into the island, except for Nolan. Now, who exactly is Ashley Cole? Well, she is the stepson of one of Nolan's quote-unquote friends, Warren Hudson, And if you watched my previous video on the case, you know that she is also a judge herself. And I showed you guys how nearly immediately after this case started receiving worldwide attention, Ashley Cole, this judge, had deleted her social media profiles. And then she put up a long post saying that the deletion was for the safety of her and her family, and that her and her stepson Warren, who had been on Horn Island with Nolan that day, were cooperating with authorities. Well, now Warren is talking directly. He did an interview recently, and right off the rip, there are some suspicious things surrounding Warren, the way he speaks about Nolan, and the interview overall.
Did you notice the watch worn by the white man claiming to be Nolan Wells's friend during an interview? No wonder he was the only one willing to speak among the group. Few realize it was all orchestrated. After Nolan's tragic drowning, attention turned to the young white men on the boat. While others stayed silent, Warren, claiming to be Nolan's best friend, gave an interview. But three details raised serious doubts. First, Warren's watch actually had a recording device. He wore it to capture real-time feedback from the interview. Since his mother is a senior judge, the interview was essentially a legal rehearsal. She had prepped him, and the recording allowed them to review and adjust strategies behind the scenes, building a solid defense case for any future legal proceedings. Second, when describing the death of his lifelong best friend, Warren showed remarkable coldness. His voice had no emotion, no trace of grief. An even bigger red flag came when asked, "Why didn't Nolan's mother know you at all before this?" His excuse, "We'd just never been to Nolan's house before." That explanation makes no sense for someone claiming to have grown up together and only revealed his guilt. Most bafflingly, if a person insists they're innocent and loved their deceased friend, they'd typically attend the funeral. Yet Warren ultimately refused to go to Nolan's funeral. If he truly had nothing to hide, why couldn't he face Nolan's family? Why couldn't he stand before his friend's casket? This determined avoidance shows his inner fear and inability to face the truth. Is this really because he has a clear conscience?
In this interview, Warren gives a breakdown of how he remembers the series of events on that tragic day that Nolan lost his life. He was actually not one of the kids on the boat that Nolan was on coming into Horn Island. He was on one of the other two boats. Remember how it was a group of friends who took 3 individual boats to go to Horn Island. With that being said, why was Warren the first one to do an interview? I'm not sure, but he gives a little recap of what exactly he believes happened.
I had a great relationship with Nolan. I've never got in an argument with Nolan. We were super close, and I've never said or will ever have anything bad to say about Nolan Wells.
And then I want you to then walk me through 4th of July this year when the incident happened.
Okay. 4th of July, everybody was out there. Like I said, like Nolan was always trying to go on the boat, trying to go out there with us. And he was always welcome to come. Nolan was always out there with us. And, but started 4th of July, you know, my buddies and I had talked about this week's upcoming, you know, everybody's very, very excited for the 4th of July from down here. Like it's a big thing. I actually stayed with Nolan that night at my buddy's house, and I woke up at my buddy's house, and we went to McDonald's, got food. Nolan was not with me. Well, first I ran to my house, then I went to McDonald's and came back, and the boat was already hooked up to my truck. My buddy Wyatt and I went, and with my buddy, and we went, filled the top of the boat off, loaded it down with ice, and just got everything ready. Then Wyatt went and put his smaller boat in the water, which is the Palm Beach.
So now he mentions Wyatt bringing a smaller boat. So now we know about 2 boats. But my thing is this, why are we only getting the GPS coordinates of 1?
He's an 18-foot Palm Beach, and Wyatt, I drove the boat from Fort Bayou boat launch to my buddy's grandparents' house, and that's where we all plan to meet up.
So I'm going to jump ahead just for a moment just to get clarity on Fort Bayou, although it's probably not going to clear up much. So he mentions Fort Bayou's boat launch. So it sounds like he drove to the boat launch with his car, detached the boat, and then drove the boat on water to Eli's grandparents' home. Jack's grandfather died in 2006. Grandmother died in February of this year. So Jack's grandparents are no longer living. However, they left this immaculate $1 million home that sits right on the water, and this is exactly where the boys took off from. This is the starting point. So Warren again mentions parking his car at Fort Bayou. We kept asking, what did Fort Bayou have to do with anything? It still doesn't make any sense to me. This broken down boat that was taken on water left Horn Island, didn't get told like they said it did, went back to Eli Jack's grandparents' house, went to Fort Bayou. I don't know who they dropped off or what they dropped off, because you were allegedly not on that boat. 15 minutes later, went right back to Eli Jack's grandparents' house. An hour later, docked at Fort Bayou and was then driven back to Wyatt's house.
And you say we all, who you talking about? You, Nolan, and how many people are going to meet you guys there?
We had roughly 20 to 30 people coming on 3 separate boats with us. And so we were all following each other out there as one big group. You know, it wasn't just me and Nolan and a couple other of my buddies. There was 20 or 30 people spread out where we all met at the dock before, and then we departed to go to Horn Island. It wasn't just a couple of us. I mean, there were so many people, we had to split up between 3 boats, and we all left and all got there at the same time.
We know about 2 boats so far, but the GPS only has documentation of 1. What happened?
What boat were you on, and what boat was Nolan on?
Nolan was on Wyatt's 22 Triton. On the way out, I went with my buddy Bart because we had a lot of friends from college coming down, and I called Bart that morning. I was like, hey man, can you take your boat out? And he was like, yeah, well, my dad's decided not to go, and I'll take the boat and I'll take you and your friends. Of course, I mean, he's a buddy of mine. And so Bart pulled up at the dock, and I mean, I rode out there with Bart and a lot of the girls that go to college with my friends and I, and Nolan rode out on the Triton, and then we had a Palm Beach, 18 Palm Beach. There was 4 guys on that. There was like 8 people on the Triton, and then there was 8 or 9 people on the Triton, and then there was the rest of the group, which was ranged from maybe 10 to 15 or 16 people on my buddy's tide line, which is 24 tide line. We followed each other out, and I mean, it was calm. It was calm. On the way back, it was a little more rough, but it was not anything all my buddies' boats couldn't handle, or like it wasn't like we were getting really beat up or anything. I mean, it was pretty calm. We got there. I helped my buddies tie the boats up because the tide line was right here, the Palm Beach was in the middle, and then the Triton was on the outer side.
And so where's Nolan in this? You know, you guys out there, the friend groups are out there, 3 boats full of people that came out there that seemed to be the closest friend group.
Right.
Where's Nolan in this in comparison to where you and others are at?
Well, you know, I had a couple conversations with Nolan that I talked to Nolan, and, you know, Nolan was drinking. Everybody was drinking, most of everybody. And I mean, Nolan seemed completely fine every time I talked to him.
Meanwhile, one of the last people to see Nolan Wells alive is speaking out to Inside Edition today.
I'd say he's pretty hammered. He would slur his words. His movement was slow.
And I mean, Nolan seemed completely fine every time I talked to him. We had just regular conversations. I talked to Nolan a couple times, but it wasn't like I was strictly sitting there talking to Nolan the whole day. I mean, there was hundreds of people I knew out there, so.
One thing in particular that stood out to me here is the fact that he's implying that Nolan was drinking, but he had not blacked out or anything of the sort. Now, it's also important to note that all of these kids are 18. The legal drinking age is 21. Warren does double down on the fact that they were all consuming alcohol, and you can certainly see that in photos that came out of Nolan and his friends on that day.
You know, I mean, that's just how it was. Everybody's drinking, you know. I mean, it's 4th of July. Everyone's just trying to enjoy themselves. And, you know, it's a big party, basically. Big party.
Yeah, so y'all pretty much having a good time. Just like anybody would imagine, 18-year-olds, probably 20-year-olds, college students, out on the island, women, you probably had alcohol. So y'all having a good time.
Yeah, of course.
Now, as far as where those 3 boats left on the morning of July 4th to Horn Island, Warren gives detail of that in this interview, stating that they left from one of their friends' grandparents' houses, and that'll play an important role in the story later on.
Right here is where Nolan and probably 20 other kids got on the boat. So it's not just Nolan and 3 other kids. That was a lie. That was a myth. I'm going to prove that. Right here is where the kids were docking, and we're going to show you a video that coincided. I'm going to walk at the exact angle that the video is being broadcast from, so you know that I'm exactly where I say I am. But the boys were here. Tons of people you'll see on the video is getting onto the boat, and they took 3 boats out. It wasn't just one. It wasn't just Nolan and 4 boys. It was a multitude of people on several different boats, and some of the boys that they're accusing wasn't even on the boat that Nolan was on. But let me show you from the vantage point where I have the video to prove that I'm here where I say I am. And so right now, here's the angle that you're gonna see on the footage. It's just from probably that boat to, maybe about 30, 40 feet here to the right. And this is where the video is showing how many people were actually out there, actually getting on the boats. So therefore it debunks very clearly that it was only Nolan and 4 boys going out here.
But see, the ultimate question is not really what boat did Nolan get on to go to Horn Island. Again, it was a boat that belonged to one of the friend's grandparents. We know that. We saw the pictures of Nolan with his quote-unquote friends. But the real question is, what boat did Nolan plan to or actually take back home on that night? And Warren gives detail on that, but the more he says, the darker this whole situation seems to get.
The boat was already hooked up to my truck. My buddy Wyatt and I went, and with my buddy, we went, filled the top of the boat off, loaded it down with ice, and just got everything ready. Then Wyatt went and put his smaller boat in the water, which is the Palm Beach. He's an 18-foot Palm Beach, and I drove the boat from Fort Bayou Boat Launch to my buddy's grandparents' house, and that's where we all planned to meet up that day.
Yeah.
But I mean, if we're walking towards the east right now, but if you walk down to the west, that's where the west tip of the island is, and that's where the current picks up very, very bad.
That morning, the body was observed on the northwest portion of Horn Island.
And people say that you guys just left Nolan behind. I've seen reports of people saying that you just left him. I see reports of people saying that you asked him to get on the boat. You told him to get on the boat, he didn't. What's the truth in that?
Well, Wyatt was having boat issues, and the bilge wouldn't pump. So the bilge is basically a pump that releases water from your boat when water comes in. So I opened the back hatch, and there's water up to the batteries. And that is obviously not good. There's water almost coming over the transom, which is where your motors sit, and which is by the stern, like in the back part of the boat. So obviously we were in emergency. The boat, we're trying to save the boat. It's not like we didn't ask Nolan or we just left Nolan. Nolan decided to stay on the island with the girl that he was with. And the girl is a witness to that too.
Yeah.
Now, you remember Katie's sister Gracie said that Katie had a conversation and assumed that Nolan was getting ready to get on the boat he came out in. Katie made it home because she was on another boat and with different people. Katie was safe because my brother and sister-in-law went and got her. Katie assumed the friends telling him to get on the boat wouldn't have left him.
Nolan decided to stay on the island with the girl that he was with. And the girl is a witness to that too.
As a former video journalist, I don't just hear the words, I see the edits. In today's age, every interview is going to be a polished production, and that means you have to look at every single thing with a critical eye. If you watch the whole thing, you're going to see the shift from when he's comfortable talking to when he struggles. You'll see he's very comfortable talking about the island and then going in on protocols for phones and water for 3.5 minutes.
If you drop your phone in salt water, most of the time, you're not going to get it back. Yeah. I mean, especially the water's murky right now.
But the moment that he gets the big question from Tatum that relates to Nolan or any pivotal facts to the case, he struggles to retell that moment.
So, obviously, we were in emergency. The boat, we're trying to save the boat. It's not like we didn't ask Nolan or we just left Nolan.
He starts, then there's a cut, then wraps it up awkwardly and quickly puts it off to the girl who's on the island. I'm not here to convict, but I can question. If you can give a whole TED talk on phone water safety, you can clearly articulate about leaving the island.
So now going into the third part of the interview that Officer Tatum did with Warren, Warren begins to talk about the Triton. The Triton is the boat that Ike owns. Ike Pyron is Wyatt Pyron's brother.
I got on the Triton, and the Triton had probably about 6 inches of water up to the transom. And I was freaked out because I'm good friends with Wyatt, and that was his boat. And no water's coming out, no access water's coming out. And, it was a big issue because I think the reason was because there were so many people getting on and off the boat. And at some point the boat was very, very crowded and there was just a lot of people on. So that it drags water in. And eventually, I think over time, we were out there for a couple hours. The boat just started filling up with water. So I popped the starboard side hatch, and the battery was completely underwater. And so the motor wouldn't trim down. I mean, my buddy would go to trim it down from the console, and it'd trim down, and then it'd come right back up. And so Wyatt's trying to throw a rear anchor, so we're caught, and he's, yelling at people. Everybody's kind of freaking out. And eventually I'm like yelling at other people, trying to tell them, calm down. Like, the boat could possibly sink, and I'm not paying attention to everyone around me. I was paying attention to my buddy's boat. And that's what all my other friends that were on that boat were doing, trying to solve the problem.
So you're on the boat now, the water's getting up to the point where the boat may be disabled to where you couldn't get it out from Horn Island. So what happens after that?
Wyatt jumps to the water, tries to throw a rear anchor, and my buddy you're sitting, looking, trying to pull trash out the bilge. And the bilge is basically a pump that pulls the water, the access water out the boat. So the bilge was failing to work. So any excess water was just sitting in the boat. It wasn't getting pumped out. And I looked over the gunnel and I looked at the release hole for the bilge, and it was even with the water. So, I mean, we're all freaking out. All of our, we're not focused on anything else other than the boat. Eventually, my buddy Bart on the tide line is like, I'm going to pull y'all out to where we're out of all this, all this chaos. Because we left at 4:30 and there were still just as many people there, if not more, than when we got there. I mean, probably around the same amount. I mean, it was crazy. Like, there was a lot of people. And, I mean, eventually, Bart pulls us out. We left at 4:30, but we really weren't pulled out away from everybody. We were probably about a quarter mile out, and we had the towing strap pulled from, Bart's port side cleat or starboard side cleat, and he was on our starboard side bow. And so it was rubbing on his power pole. So Bart turned around, pulled up next to our boat, and we were just trying to get it situated. So that's when Wyatt called Cito.
Someone on the boat reported a mechanical failure to a private towing company.
I want to get this boat unsank and towed back.
The towing dispatcher reached out to a local boat captain to help.
It sounds like a bunch of kids on board on Horn Island. He wants you guys to go out there and unpump the boat and then tow it in.
But the company says it did not end up towing the boat, saying to NBC News in a statement, before assistance was rendered, the vessel owner advised that sea tow was no longer needed because help had already been obtained. Sea tow's involvement concluded at that point.
And Wyatt was like, calls them, because the cell service isn't great at the island, but once you can use your phone, but stuff might not just send, and it's not great. You got maybe one bar, it won't work that well. But once you get a little off the island, you have cell coverage. And even on the island, like I called my mom when we were on the island, it was fine.
And so you guys get ready to leave out of there, you're getting towed out.
Yeah.
And then where's Nolan in this situation?
Well, the last time I saw Nolan was 3:00, and Nolan was cradling a girl in his arms, Katie, Katie. And Katie, Nolan was sitting there, and the last time I saw him, I looked at Nolan, and Nolan was like shaking his head, laughing, and I was like, dude, you crazy. I was like just joking with him. That was the last time I laid eyes on him. But when we were leaving, obviously, no one is getting left at the island that came with us unless they demanded to, be there and asked, this is a very common thing at Horn Island. When you're out there, a lot of people ride out there with someone and in with somebody else all the time. I've done that 100 times. It's a very common thing. But Nolan was sitting by the boat with that Katie girl, and my buddy yelled for Nolan, get on the boat. We're leaving. The boat's having issues. And like, no, he didn't say that, but he was panicking. Nolan, get the F on the boat. Get on the boat.
So if Nolan is sitting by the boat with that Katie girl.
Nolan was sitting by the boat with that Katie girl.
As the boat is sinking and Wyatt is cussing him out, telling him to get the F on the boat.
He was panicking. Nolan, get the F on the boat. Get on the boat.
And if you recall, Warren's birth mother said that Wyatt repeatedly asked Nolan to get on the boat at 5 o'clock when it was time to leave, but Nolan wanted to stay with the girl and their boat was parked next to his. He was insistent about staying with this girl. Wyatt asked him several times to please get on the boat and people heard him. So if the distress call for the boat sinking was made at 4 o'clock.
We're sinking. Can you all please come?
How is it that you, his best friend, hasn't seen him since 3?
Last time I saw Nolan was 3 o'clock.
Yeah, Wyatt was cussing him out, telling him to get the F on the boat at 4 o'clock when y'all started to sink. And everyone on the Triton heard it because all of you were right there and Katie was right beside the boat with Nolan.
And Nolan said, no, I'm staying out here. I'm going to ride in with somebody else. And it's not uncommon to hear, but it's not like my buddy asked him one time. My buddy asked Nolan multiple times to get on the boat. Nolan, get on the boat. Get on the boat. We're leaving. If you're coming, you got to come now. And Nolan made a decision to stay out on the island. And like he said, you know.
How many people heard that? Were there just,
at least
just a
5
few, or?
I mean, everyone that was on our boat right there. Everyone that was on our boat right there. Because the Palm Beach had already left. My buddy went ahead and went home on the Palm Beach and 3 guys on the way back. And Nolan wasn't the only person to ride out there with us and in with somebody else.
There he goes, getting uncomfortable again, and he always adds more stank on it when he starts to tell some fibs.
I mean, we had multiple people in our group that rode out with us and rode in on someone else's boat. And that, like I said, that's not an uncommon thing to do, you know? I mean, a lot of people do that. I could name probably 50 people out there that day that ran out with somebody and ran back in with somebody else. So, I mean, it's not like it's an uncommon thing.
I'm a practicing psychotherapist. I've been working with clients who've been struggling with issues like things like grief for over 20 years. And this young man is behaving very unusually. I'm going to give you some examples to demonstrate as to what I mean. Number one, the person doing the interview, whose name I will not say because I do not support him, he brought him to the location where this happened. That should have been a massive trigger. You just lost your best friend that you say is like a brother to me. That you explained we went to elementary school, middle school, high school together and continued to stay close through our first year of college. And now you're going back to the site where he lost his life. That is unusual. People who experience an emotional connection to somebody and they lose them, you could take that person back to the spot where they lost a friend or loved one 30 years later and it should trigger them. You're back 2 weeks later and having no emotional response to being in that location. That is very, very odd. I also strongly believe that his interview and his responses are being coached and was well rehearsed. Notice how many times, and you can see this throughout all of the interviews, but notice how many times he repeats himself. He doesn't refer to Nolan by any other phrase except Nolan. He doesn't say, man, my boy, or my good buddy, I can't believe. He doesn't say any of that. Just Nolan, 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 Nolan. That is unusual, and that level of repetitiveness tells me that this is a rehearsed response. Now, as a psychotherapist, we get trained as this kind of thing because very often we interview children who've had a traumatic experience through the family courts, like domestic violence or a divorce proceeding, or sometimes through SA. We have to interview children, and you can tell when the children have been coached by exactly things like this. I'll give you another thing that's really important that stood out to me. When people lie, they go into deep, irrelevant details. So when he was asking that clip about, like, did you ask Nolan to come back with you? He goes into a deep explanation on what a bilge is and the functionality of a boat. That has nothing to do with what is going on right now. But when people are telling stories, they oftentimes will give very deep explanations that have absolutely nothing to do with the content of the conversation itself. These are all things that let me know this young man is hiding something. I do not know what. I cannot tell you exactly what it is, but this would be incredibly alarming. And I think the last thing is he describes like Nolan want to stay with a girl, but 100% he should absolutely be saying things like, I wish I hadn't let him. Something told me, man, we need to stick together as a group. I wish I had asked one of the other friends to stay on the boat with Nolan. There is no evidence of remorse coming from this young man at all. He is simply repeating the story, detail by detail, with no remorse, no tears, no pain, no anxiety, no affect change as he tells the story. He's just telling the story, and he's explaining it in such a way that absolves him of any responsibility and puts all of the responsibility on Nolan. He has previously in other interviews said Nolan was drinking. He did not say we were drinking. He said Nolan wanted to stay. He did not say we supported Nolan saying, like, it's just all on Nolan. And again, 100% of the time, he should be saying something like, Nolan wanted to stay with the girl, but I wish we hadn't let him. Nolan wanted to stay with the girl, but we shouldn't have let him do that by himself. One of us should have stayed with him. He's not saying any of that. He is simply recounting the details of the story as if it's like a chapter in a book, as if it was just like a random day where nothing unusual happened, not like it's the day where he lost his best friend and someone he refers to as brother.
But it's not like we just left him there, or my friends just left him there. Nolan made a decision to stay on the island after my friends asked him multiple times and told him to get on the boat, and he decided to stay.
And I heard the girl that he was with, Katie, had text somebody that she heard people yelling for Nolan to get on it. Is that true?
And I have a picture of that. She texted my buddy, and the next day everybody was panicking and everybody's texting Katie, you know, because she was obviously seen with Nolan the whole day at the island.
So you guys get in the boat, you start to get towed in, and you make it back. Now explain how did you get to the point where you were concerned about Nolan? Because obviously you said, hey, Nolan, y'all need to, or somebody, not
when
you,
did I get
but
to that point?
You guys had made mention Nolan need to get on a boat. He didn't. You guys get back to wherever you're going. Explain that. Did you guys go back to somebody's house, or you guys like what happened there? And then when did you feel like, well, wait a minute, where's Nolan?
Right. Okay. Well, running in was very chaotic. I mean, Nolan chose to stay on the island, so my focus wasn't on anything else other than the boat, you know, because if the boat doesn't get in, then no one gets in. You know, I don't want to sink out there on my buddy's boat, and no one does. But my buddy Wyatt jumped out and pulled the plug on the boat once we kind of got out there, because he got the motor to trim down. And the motor trimmed down, my buddy Wyatt pulled the plug, and we planed off. We moved all the weight to the front of the boat so we could plane off. And eventually we planed off, and the boat was running. So when you're planed off and you have water in the boat and you're hauling, you know, we're going pretty fast. We're going probably 40, 42 miles an hour. And so all that excess water that was built up in the boat is coming out of the boat. So, I mean, that's what we had to do. So we ran into Fort Bayou, and we didn't just run straight to my buddy's grandparents' house. We ran into Fort Bayou.
And this is why they say a lie don't care who tell it. They left Horn Island at 4:31 and immediately went back to El Camino Rio Road, which is Jack's grandparents' house, at 5:44. But because this is another lie, watch him begin to elaborate.
A couple of us jumped in the water, and Wyatt, like, the whole reason for the stop was so Wyatt could hop in and put the plug back in the boat. So then after that, we went and docked it, and I went back to my buddy's house, and we ate and, napped for a little bit. It was a long day at the island, so, we were all tired. And
that's another lie, because after you went to Jack's grandparents' house, you then boogied it back to Fort Bayou at 5:52, but you state you only went there to put the plug back in the boat. But if y'all had already made it back to Jack's grandparents' house, why did you have to go to Fort Bayou to do that? The only thing I could think about that's at Fort Bayou is your car. So what did you get out of it?
The boat was already hooked up to my truck. I drove the boat from Fort Bayou boat launch to my buddy's grandparents' house. Eventually we go over to a girlfriend of mine. She was having people over for 4th of July. We were doing like fireworks and stuff. So we all went over there to swim and hang out.
Now, just a couple key things to remember with Warren's timeline. The boat that took Nolan from Mississippi to Horn Island had left Horn Island and had a leak in it, so they needed to fix it. And they traveled into Fort Bayou in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, before taking their boat out of the water at the Fort Bayou boat launch. According to GPS tracking data obtained from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, that boat's movements after leaving the island included the following. At 4:31 p.m., the boat departed Horn Island after experiencing a bilge pump and water intake issues. 5:52 p.m., entered into Fort Bayou. 6:06 p.m., returned to the original departure dock. And then at 7:19 p.m., arrived at the Fort Bayou boat launch to be loaded back onto the trailer and removed from the water. Now, aside from Warren's expressionless face as he gives detail about a supposed lost best friend, a brother, in a supposed drowning accident, he also gives detail into the picture that we saw last week that I broke down in my previous video, where it seemed to be Nolan at a pool party with a bunch of friends, with Warren in the picture actually hugging Nolan, and the picture was posted after July 4th. Many people believed that the event that this picture captured actually took place after leaving Horn Island, meaning that Nolan had actually made it home safely and something happened possibly at this party that was pictured. But Warren explains that it actually took place the week before. It is very interesting and peculiar though, because he says that after leaving Horn Island on July 4th, he did also go back to a friend's house and have a pool party. And the picture in question is of Nolan Wells and Warren at a pool party.
This infamous picture that I've seen online of Nolan in the water in the swimming pool.
Yeah.
Where is this picture associated with? Because you said you guys went back to swim. Nolan wasn't with you.
Yeah.
So where is this picture at? Like, what's the context around the picture that's been floating?
That picture is taken on June 27th, a week before the 4th of July. We all went to a friend of ours in Pass Christian. We have a lot of friends from Bay St. Louis, Pass Christian. We all went over there to hang out, and
And Nolan was in that picture?
Nolan was in that picture. And if you look in the picture, my arm is around Nolan in that picture, And, that was a week before the 4th of July. So that picture is not associated within even the same, that was like a week before. So, yeah.
How long was it before you realized, or you guys realized that, where's Nolan at?
I went back downstairs and all my friends were just hanging out. And my buddy Wyatt had addressed, talking about Nolan. And I was like, well, where is Nolan? Have y'all heard from him? And he was like, no, we haven't. And I was like, okay, well, it's a little concerning. Like, I'm not freaking out or anything, but like, I'm trying to find out where Nolan is. So I texted Javon and I was like, hey, and also a couple other buddies that I had at the island. I was like, hey, have y'all seen Nolan? Did he ride in with y'all? And all the buddies were like, no. Well, I texted Javon and I was like, hey, can you send me Miss Christine's number? Because I haven't heard from Nolan. And if she hasn't heard from Nolan, then I'm calling the Coast Guard. And so eventually Javon sends me her number.
Who is her? That's
Miss Christine.
Miss Christine is
Nolan's mom.
Nolan's mom. Okay.
Yeah. I walked down to the dock because, there was a lot of people at Ava's. Not a lot, but, there was probably 15 of our friends there. And I was just like, walked down to the dock with a couple of my buddies, and I got on the phone I called Miss Christine, called her the first time. She didn't answer. I called her a second time, and I got on the phone with her, and I asked her if she had heard from Nolan. She said no. And I said, all right, well, don't freak out. I'm going to call the Coast Guard. And this was at about 11 o'clock.
So what's your intent in calling the Coast Guard, right? Because right now, Nolan could be with a chick. He could be with somebody else.
Right.
He could have gone back with somebody else. What made you concerned enough that you felt like you couldn't weigh it out anymore? You had to call the Coast Guard?
Like I said, my friends and I have been on the water our whole life. Stuff happens. People die all the time. I know people that have died out there. And, it's a fun place to be, but it's also a very, very dangerous place to be if you're not handling it right. And Nolan, so I hadn't heard from him, and obviously I'm thinking I'd way rather be safe than sorry. I mean, I would rather call the Coast Guard 100 times and lose my mind over it and my buddy be okay than, not, and me not know where he is and him not be okay. And so I called the Coast Guard and I talked to them on the phone for like 20 minutes, gave him a description, what Nolan was wearing, the last place we were at, the last time I saw him, who were we with, what boat we were on, the conditions of the water, just a summary. And I called Miss Christine back after and I talked to her and I said, I got in contact with the Coast Guard. I'm not sure who she called or, what she did, but I think she said she was going to make a couple phone calls to either DMR or Jackson County Sheriff's Office. And I was thinking worst case scenario. I would way rather be safe than sorry about this, I was just worried about my friend, stuff happens out there, boat problems, it could be anything. But, there's a lot of stuff that happens out there and I was just worried about my friend.
And so you guys made that call, nothing that night. And I'm assuming you wake up the next day and then what happens?
I wake up the next day at about 7:30 and my dad had texted me because obviously Nolan's photo was all over Facebook, and I just saw it everywhere and I was freaked out because I was like, oh my gosh, I assumed, Nolan's just, we had been drinking all day and that he's just sleeping somewhere and, that he's okay. I didn't want to believe that if we didn't know for sure. So, next day I woke up and my stepdad walked to my room and he said, hey, have they heard anything about Nolan? What's going on? Because I hadn't spoke to him. And he was like, I was like, yeah, no, I don't know. I had just gotten up. And he was like, all right, well, we're going and getting on the boat and looking for him. And I was like, okay, yeah. So I got my buddy Ricky, I got my buddy Brooks, and I got my buddy Jax. My mom came on the boat with my stepdad and I, and we all went out there and looked. When I got out there was dozens of DMR boats, helicopters, planes flying over Horn Island. And this wasn't just Horn Island. There was also Ship Island they were looking at, I'm sure, and Chandelier Island, Petty Boy. It wasn't just Horn Island specifically, but where I was at Horn, there were boats everywhere.
And then after this, obviously they didn't find Nolan that day.
Right.
And so what was your reaction like when you heard the news, or how did you hear the news that they found Nolan's body?
Well, the next day, it got to be about 1 o'clock on July 5th. And I was like, my mind started to turn. I was like, man, if he's not awake yet, where is he? I got very, very worried. And, I was with my buddy Brooks the next day and we're driving and my buddies were texting my group chat. They were like, hey, listen. And then I got a phone call from my buddy Trace and he was like, hey man, they just found his body. And I was like, I wanted to have hope, but it was really, really hard to have hope when they haven't found your buddy in the last 2 days. And, but there's still a little bit of hope there, maybe, he's not gone and maybe, he's okay. But my reaction was just, I was with my buddy Brooks and I broke down. I haven't experienced death a lot, but I know people that have died out there, especially with someone I'm as close with as Nolan. And I broke down and I sat there on my buddy Brooks' shoulder and I cried and I was upset. I made a couple phone calls to my buddies and checked up on my buddies because, I care about my buddies too. We're all experienced this. We all realized at the same time. We all heard the news at the same time. He's gone. And so it was really, really hard on me. I've never experienced something like this, and it was traumatic.
So while Warren gives his depiction of the series of events that took place on the day that Nolan lost his life, you have to remember one key detail, which is that one of the boats that was taken back from Horn Island belonged to one of Nolan's quote-unquote friends' grandfather. This was reportedly the very boat that Nolan actually came into the island from. And remember how that boat had to make an emergency stop because it started taking on water and couldn't keep sailing safely. Well, the grandson of the owner of that boat ended up calling a towing company to come pick up the boat on their way home from Horn Island around 4:30, one of the last moments where Nolan had actually made contact with anybody. And in that phone call, you hear some very disturbing things. The audio is extremely muffled, and I do want to emphasize this video is not to accuse anybody of any crime. It's more so the overall idea that this case and Nolan's family deserves a full investigation. Everyone involved, their phones should be checked, they should be questioned, everything should be put under a magnifying scope for justice to be properly served, and for Nolan's family to get some closure. Now, with that being said, this phone call is very tough to hear, but some people interpret the beginning of the call while an operator is connecting the kids to the tow company. There's a lot of panic in the background, and again, people interpret someone saying Nolan and oh my god, he's dead.
Were Nolan Wells' friends talking about him and talking about him possibly being dead while they were on their way back to the mainland from Horn Island? This is all because of some audio that we got from officials down in Mississippi. This audio is a call that's being made from the boat that Nolan's friends were on. So after they're on Horn Island on July 4th, at the end of the day, about 4:30, they decide they're heading back to the mainland. And the owner of that boat, or the grandson of the owner who's driving the boat, realizes that they are taking on water. Their bilge pump isn't working, so he places a call to a tow company called Sea-Tow. And while he's on that call, there is a lot of commotion going on. And what people think is that in the background of that call, you can hear someone say, "Is he dead? Nolan. Oh my God." It's really hard to make out. This is what it sounds like.
Sea-Tow Assistance, Vicky speaking. How can I help you? All right, of course. How far is the water coming up, sir?
No, we do not need that.
All right.
Oh, let the go. No, we do not need that.
Now, there are other parts of the audio where people think they hear the words "check his chest" or "wake up." One thing you can definitely hear clearly is the guy who's calling the tow company says, "Shut the bleep up." Now, he could have been yelling to some people. He does tell the dispatcher that there are about 7 people on board, all of them under the age of 20, under 21, he says. What doesn't make sense is why would they, if they had something, if there had been foul play and something happened to Nolan or someone did something to Nolan on that boat, why would they be talking about it loudly while he's on the phone to a tow company? Just doesn't add up. People we've spoken to in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, say that that whole conversation here in the background is just chaos as these young, as I say kids, but these young men were trying to get back to the shore and the boat's taking on water. They're all trying to figure out what to do. Are they gonna have to get off the boat? That's what all that chaos is, what we're told by people connected to the kids who are on that boat. The other thing is, this is after 4:30. We have been told that there is evidence that, or the police have testimony from people that Nolan was still on the island after 4:30. That would track with what Warren has been saying, that when they left at 4:30, they had a heated conversation with Nolan saying, get on the boat, and he said, I'm not going, I'm gonna get a ride back with someone else. So it would make sense that Nolan would still be on Horn Island after 4:30, which means that this whole audio, while they're on the boat after 4:30, they've left Horn Island, they wouldn't be referring to Nolan. It just seems like people are hearing something that isn't actually there.
Again, this video is purely to display the facts that we have so far, the statements that we've heard from Nolan's quote-unquote friends, and the sad thing is, the more people speak, the more information that comes out to the public, the more questions there are than answers. So let's just pray that Nolan Wells' family gets the justice, the closure, and the proper investigation that they deserve. Rest in peace to Nolan Wells.